Hello everyone, today's the day. I'm here to talk about charcuterie boards. They have become one of my favorite things to do for when we have company. I don't know about you, but there's something about the way it all looks and how welcoming it feels when people walk in and they go ooh and ah, and then they get to feast on all these lovely little mouthfuls of flavor. So I want to share how I do it with you and some of my tips and things that I've learned over time as I've been putting them together various different ways. But first things first, I wanted to chat a little bit about what you put them on. So you might think that you could use any old cutting board, but the simple fact of that approach is that if you grab a cutting board that you've recently sliced some onions on or some garlic, and then you set your beautiful charcuterie on that, there is a very good chance that your food will absorb some of the smell from the board if your board wasn't washed perfectly or perhaps even bleached cleanly. So what I've always tried to do is keep a separate set of boards for my charcuterie. And I have 3 different sizes here that also help me figure out or gauge how much food I'm going to be putting out depending on how big my party is or how many guests are coming. So for instance, I have a smallish board here this is a handmade board, by the way, by Junite, who is a wonderful classical guitarist out of the Waterloo area. So Junite, thank you for this. It's beautiful and we use it often. It's got a nice finish on it. It's very smooth. It doesn't have any stains from anything. So it still looks beautiful when you put it out on the table with your charcuterie on it. So this is smallish. It's good for 2 people. And then the next size that I have is a really great sort of mid-century looking teak piece. It's probably something that belonged to my mom and dad a long time ago. And again, it has a beautiful finish to it. So it's not a porous piece of wood. It looks like it has some kind of sateen on it as well. So I use this for a mid-sized gathering. For today's purposes, I'm going to use this board because I want to show you a board with as much stuff on it as I can put on it, and I don't want it to be too small, and I also don't want it to be too big. So this is a really beautiful, also oldish board that I've had for a really long time, and I have used this when we have a big family gathering, and especially when all the kids are present, because their appetites are just so huge. You'd think at ages 25 and up that they would be done growing, and maybe they are, but their appetites have not slowed down. So that is how I choose my board, and today I'm going to use this one. Charcuterie comes from the French charcuterie, which means basically cooked flesh, but it has transformed itself into what we know as an array of cured cold meats. That's the origin of charcuterie. So I always start with my meat when I'm putting a board together. I am, as I said earlier, I am pulling out everything from my fridge that I think could work on a board, and I'm going to try to put it to use and combine it. I've got a bunch of things here: a German salami, a glazed Parmesan salmetti, I got a calabrese piquante, and I have some other mild Genoa salami here, as well as some mortadella. So I probably won't use this one because it's unopened, but I'm going to focus on using these ones. I wanted to share a rule of thumb that I have stumbled across in my travels online, and for a charcuterie board to have an appeal, it's really great to just start with the idea of a 3-3-3-3 kind of combination. So you want 3 meats, 3 cheeses that complement the meats, 3 types of starch, so 3 kinds of crackers, if you will, or small pieces of bread that are toasted, things like that, and an array of at least 3 kinds of accompaniments, or things like nuts, dried fruit, or actual fruit like grapes, raspberries, blueberries. Those things I use as fillers when I'm putting the final touches on my board. So don't forget about the 3-3-3-3 rule. Here too is another thing that I love putting out either on part of the board or beside the board, and that is eggs. I almost always make deviled eggs, or you can simply hard boil an egg and slice it up and then lie it down on the board, and they would look beautiful as well. So don't forget about eggs as an option on your boards. They count too. I often like to make sure that there is a good balance of sweet and savory on the board as well. So that's something else to think about. And one more little thought, and that is garnishes. So a sprig of rosemary here and there, a little bunch of parsley. Even if nobody eats it, it looks beautiful and it creates a stunning impression. Let's get started with this nice mild Genoa salami. I'm going to show you how to make a meat rose. This is by far my favorite part of the board, and it's almost like the feature of the board because it's so different and so fancy, like a feature wall in your house that you want to stand out. So what I always like to look for is a nice round piece of meat. It doesn't have to be salami, but something that's round like this and about this size, and also a good enough thickness that you have enough heaviness to work with. If it's too thin, it will make a floppy rose and that won't be good. So look for something that's sort of a mid thickness and also not too thick. What you do is get a smallish glass. I've got a juice glass here, and you just simply start laying the salami in around the edge. I like to give it a little push so that it actually sticks to the edge of the glass here. And then you just keep layering it all around the glass over and over. I've got about probably 20 pieces of meat here. And I'm not gonna chintz out on this, so because I want my rose to look full when it's finished. Some of these are in fact a tiny bit thinner than others, but I think the girl did a good job at the deli when I asked her for medium sliced. Here we go. I'm going around the glass. I'm creating several layers of this, and I'm not going to stop until I feel like my rose is filled in the center. You can see how, I'm going to come around. You can see how I'm layering it on the glass there, all around the glass. So the center though still has quite a hole. I'm going to continue until I've filled that in. I just love the little peppercorns too. They add a nice texture to this. And this is a wonderful taste, one of my favorites. Although I do have a preference for a German salami than an Italian one, but well, I can't complain. There we go. I've almost got them all used up. And stick it all together. So here's the trick. It's finished on the glass. It's layered. There's a bit of a smaller hole in there. And I'm going to choose a spot on my board for this to sit. I'd never put it right in the middle because I do not like symmetry with these things. I like things to be asymmetrical. And what you do is you just simply drop the glass upside down on the board and then kind of wiggle it out. Come on out. I pushed it in pretty hard. Wiggle it on out of there. There we go. And this one needs pushing back in. There. Wow, that is a wonderfully pretty rose. I'm just folding down some of the edges on the innermost section here so that they look a little fuller. And then I'm keeping the center the way that it came off the glass. I'm going to show you a top view now. Here's our board so far, and here is the salami rose. Just look at that, what a stunning display and very eye-catching. Next up is this smaller cut of meat. It's the smaller salmetti with the Parmesan coating on it. So it creates something different already in terms of visual interest on the board being of a different size and also having the coating around it. So I'm going to use my Santoku knife and just slice a few pieces of this for the board. I'm probably going to use only half of this piece here because I don't want to overdo it, and I do want to make sure I leave enough room on the board for other things. So now I've got about 12 slices of this smaller piece of meat, and I just wanted to say, you know, don't be afraid to try different things. It would be pretty boring if you simply stacked it up and put it on the board like that. So what I suggest is just to play around with a small design or a little pattern that will array it on the plate. And again, it doesn't have to be like perfectly done or fancy, but tighten it up. Don't spread it out too much. And maybe here what I'm going with is kind of a triangle, so I'm reducing the number of pieces with each row that I go to. I've got 3 left here. I can probably add 1 to each row. So that's kind of how I fart around with things to figure out what exactly. So I would add 1, 2 more pieces to that, just to finish it off evenly. There we go. Nice, so it looks like a pizza pie. And you can't really see it, so that's what I've done. Now I've got the calabrese. It's quite a lot more spicy than these other 2 meats, so I am glad to put it on the board because it's going to create a difference between the flavors that are available on the board. I'm also going to use fewer pieces of this than I have of the other one of the same size because I still have my mortadella to put on there as well. Oh, that didn't go so well. Ooh. It's okay to nibble while you do this too. No one will know. Ooh, it's hot. See, I always eat the imperfect ones, but that's a little spicy for me. Okay, I think I'm stopping there with this. Let's see what I can do. Maybe a little arc over here. That's all. That's all it has to be, just a tiny bit of meat sitting there. Now I'm ready to start looking at the cheeses. And there are lots of sites online that will teach you exactly how to pair meats together with cheeses so that they complement each other. I'm not that fussy about that, and I don't think my guests generally are that discerning, but what I do try to do is offer an array of cheeses that have different levels of sharpness or mildness to complement the meat. So if you have a mild cheese, I would pair it with a zippy piece of meat, and if you have a tangy cheese, I would pair that with a milder piece of meat. So for instance, I've got a marbled cheddar here. This is all I had in my fridge. Half a chunk of brie and some blue cheese. Blue cheese is probably the tangiest of these 3 cheeses, so I'm going to sit it close by to the mortadella, and then the other 2 cheeses I'm going to work around the tray and put them next to the red meat. But mind you, blue cheese actually pairs really beautifully with red meat as well. To lay the cheddar out, I'm going to make it into cubes today. I usually slice it and just spread it out on there, but I think cubes will be a little more fun and interesting today. So I'm slicing it about 1/2 inch thick, and then I'm going to go back and slice it again into cubes. And then I'm just gonna pile it in a couple of spots on the board so that there are a few places to pick up your cheddar cheese. I'm not being too precise with this. A block of cheese is a block of cheese, right? But the point I'm trying to make is that do try to make things interesting on your board. Oh, you know what? That looks like a lot already. So I'm just going to start in a couple of spots and just sort of, oh, yeah, I said I was going to, here we go. Randomly drop this cheese here. So a little bit about positioning. I don't leave any space between my stuff. In fact, I actually like to overlap things a tiny bit, and I think a board looks wonderful if it's fully covered as opposed to leaving any blank spaces on the board. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. So here we are with our meats, and the mortadella fanned out very nicely, and now the cheese. And what I've done here is add a little bit of height to that, again creating texture and interest. There are a number of ways to work with brie on your boards. If you had a smaller wheel of brie, for instance, you could simply place the whole wheel on your board and cut out a few wedges of it and leave the knife in place so that it looks ready to eat, but people would have to come along and cut remaining pieces for themselves. So today, because I have quite a large wheel but only half of it left, I think that I will cut a few wedges, but then I'm going to cut a few slices as well. I've got a really nice serrated tomato knife here to cut this with, but I know there are special things for cheese as well. I'm just gonna cut a few bigger wedges. We love cheese in this house. I'm sure you do too. So how is that? And then I'm gonna lay them out over here by this red meat, just like that. And then maybe another piece over here. I might change my mind too about what I'm doing with all of this, because I might find that I want to put something else on the board and now I don't have room. So don't feel as though you are stuck with what you've got in place. You can wiggle things around and change it as often as you like, or as much as you like. Another thing that I really love about how my boards look is the variety of little instruments that I have on there. This is a knife, this is a little fork, and this is a slicer for things. I've got an old silverware butter knife. This could probably cut cheese as well. And I have a lovely piece that I picked up on holiday down in the Caribbean. It's got some starfish on it. And I have quite a few tiny silver spoons that belonged to my grandmother. So all of these are treasures in my view, and I love putting them right out on the boards with food. Let's place our blue cheese now on the board. I have cut a wedge of it here. I don't want to mess around with crumbling it or slicing it into pieces. It's kind of too crumbly for that, but a wedge works really nicely for me. And I've looked at all sides of it for the prettiest side, and this one has a lovely line of blue down the side there. So I'm going to place that just next to the mortadella and sort of on a little angle. Again, it's not in relation to anything else on the board specifically, and I will be filling in these gaps with other things. So it's close enough to the mortadella that people might grab it together with the mortadella for a flavor burst. Now I'm ready to start filling in some of the corners of the board with some of the smaller items that are in my pantry. Here I've got raisins, I have dates, I've got almonds, I have some candied cashews, and I have dried apricots. I always love to put figs on the board, but today I don't have any. And another thing that I found to look really beautiful also, which I don't have today, is black garlic, and you can find that in any Asian grocery store. I slice them in half, I leave the husks on around the garlic, and I lay them out on the board with the halves open toward one another. It looks beautiful. But figs also look beautiful when you slice them up and lay them down. So today I'm working with these things, and again, the rule of thumb is more of a guideline than anything, is to think about what you're putting the nuts next to complement. And generally it's the cheese, and in essence you would like to probably put a salty and zippy nut closer to a mild cheese. So again, the brie on here is the mildest one that I've got. And I think I might put the dates beside that and some almonds next to it. And I'm thinking that the candied cashews would look beautiful and go really well with the blue cheese. So I'm going to spread these things around the board. And the other thing that I have a few of here is chocolate covered acai. So I am going to just layer those around in the board as well. Sadly, I don't have any grapes today, but those are often what I rely on to fill spots in on the board as well. So no grapes, so what? I've sliced a few dates in half and I've kept a few whole, but I've sliced a small piece off the bottom so that I can stand them up on the board. I just thought I would make a little design kind of right here in the center of dates that are sticking straight up, again for texture and interest. And something that I learned in design school, which might be able to be applied on something like this, is that it's usually best to work in terms of odd numbers when you're placing things. So if you've ever seen the way swag and jabot curtains are designed, they usually have 3 swags and the jabots go down the side. If they had 4, it might just look a little ungainly. And 3 just tends to draw your eye differently to the center one. So it's things like that that you could think about to design your board. Mind you, I've got 4 pieces of brie there and they look pretty and I'm happy with that. So again, it's a guideline, but it's a nice idea to think about 3s, 5s, 7s, you know, that kind of approach. So let's figure out now where to place the dates. These are a very sweet dried fruit, so they offer a lot of versatility in terms of what you can pair them with. And I think it really doesn't matter where you put them. So I'm just gonna pile a few of them here. I'm being pretty careful with how I lay them out. I don't want it to be messy, but I do kind of want it to look a little bit random. So I've got some over there, and I'm gonna stick some over here around the outside edge of the rose so that they look a bit like a tiny leaf. Gosh, see, I'm just creating on the fly here. I had no idea that I would be able to do something like that. I think I need one more. One more will finish this idea off quite beautifully. With the pointed end out, boy, oh boy, that looks pretty. Here we are with our dates, those 3 standing up in the center as I mentioned, and a little pile over by the mortadella, and then around the rose. That just sort of happened. Next I'm going for the apricots. Now here's a little thing I just realized. They are quite orange in color, and so is the marbled cheddar cheese. So I'm going to avoid putting these next to the cheese. I'm just gonna find places on the board where they are going to work just fine. And I also want to make sure that I look for apricots that don't have any blemishes or brown spots on them, because they'll look much prettier on the board if they are, you know, nice looking instead of a little bit rough. You can always turn them over too if you need to, if you're short of a piece or 2. Don't be afraid to crowd things on the board too. It looks much more lush if things are bunched up together. I think I already mentioned that though. My last bunch of nuts that I'd like to put on the board today are almonds, but these are a little bit slippery and they do not hold well in a pattern or an arrangement. So I've decided to just pull out a small ramekin from my cupboard and pour some almonds in there. Again, I don't know that we're going to eat all of this tonight, but I'm going to make it look pretty. So I'm filling the bowl right to the top with as many as can fit in here. So it's a bit rounded on top. I'm just going to place it on the edge of the board right there. I've also placed some of those chocolates with the acai berries inside right next to the dates. So sweet and chocolatey and salty, everything's happening here. Let's talk about chutney now, or jams in general and jellies. They are a wonderful complement to any board like this because their sweetness or sharpness will complement just about anything on the board. So I have here a tiny bit left of the chutney I made just before Christmas. I've decided that this is my condiment of choice on the board. I do have some red pepper jelly, but I only have this one tiny bowl, and I think that I only have room for this on the board right now. So that's my choice, but your choice can be anything that you like for these things. So I'm just going to place the rest of my chutney in here. It won't fill the bowl, but for today's purposes, I think we agree that that is going to suffice. Did I already mention that I love eggs of any kind? So today I am adding some deviled eggs to my board. They are something that I always make almost every time I have company, and everybody loves them. I'm using the Easy Accent Decorator here, which is my favorite tool, and I'm just going to squish some of the yolk down into each of these halves while I chat with you. So I boiled these eggs this morning in the multi-cooker, or rather I cooked these in the multi-cooker this morning, and it was so easy, only 10 minutes and they were done. And they peeled beautifully out also after being in the multi-cooker. So I'm very pleased with how they turned out. These are also really small eggs, so they're going to look just fine and fit really well on the board as well. Couple dabs will do ya. And I'm going to top each one with a caper and a little bit of dill. We are almost done with this board. You might be able to see I've got the deviled eggs on here now. I have put 7 of them on here. Again, not an even number, and I didn't want to put too many on the board. Just wanted to create some interest and diversity here. So the rest have gone up to Eris in the office. Now all I have left is to fill in a few of the gaps, and I think I'm going to use a combination of pickled onions, which are sweet in fact, and then I'm going to lay some berries on top. I'm filling in now with some blueberries, just in a few spots where I think it is needed. First of all, for a little bit of a dark colored contrast, and yeah, just to fill up some corners that nothing else would fit in. These are the perfect thing to use. You can even just put one right there, or 2 or 3 right here. So just wedge them in, stick them in, pop them in here and there. I still have raspberries to deal with as well, so that will be my next endeavor, to fit raspberries on the board. And they're another fantastic color contrast as well. They're best if they're nice and fresh. If they're a little bit wrinklier looking at all, then those are not going to be as appealing as fresh ones are. I've placed the blueberries on the board, and if you're anything like me, maybe you are, maybe you're not, I made sure that all of the berries had the little floret part facing upwards. To me, it just looks better like that. Now I'm going to place some raspberries, and we are 99.9% complete. I've started with only a few here. I've washed them, and I'm just going to look for opportunities here to tuck them in where I might see a little spot. It takes a little bit of careful finagling and maybe a bit of an angle or something too, not just straight up, not just lying down, but poking up here and there, this way and that way. And here's another spot. These are really big, beautiful raspberries, so they add yet another pop of color to the board. I'm going to put 3 together here, right there on the edge, and off I go to wash a few more. I'm going to go for a few more raspberries just over in this corner here to contrast with the whiteness of the brie in this bit. And what else can I do? Do you see another spot? Oh, yes, I do. It's hiding on me, but there it is, right beside the rosette. I think that has it. I'm gonna call it a day with that. And I wonder what else I might have in my fridge. Usually I've got olives, or I have got, oh, I know what I've got. I have some roasted sun-dried tomatoes actually that are gonna look really nice just around the outside edge. So I'll be right back with those and then the finishing touch. These are sun-dried tomatoes that I picked up at a local Italian little butcher shop nearby, and they're not in oil or anything, so they're not going to leave a greasy mess on my board, so I'm happy about that. And I can happily put them beside where the onions are sitting over here without worrying that they will ruin the taste of the tomato. I think I wouldn't have put raspberries over there, for instance, because I would be worried about the onion flavor kind of bleeding on to into the raspberries. So that's the method to my madness right there. Again, a little trio of these, and I think, oh, I like the look of it flipped over like that. And I'm gonna just tuck it underneath the last onion. There we go. And this one with the seeds on top looks prettier. So there it goes right there on the edge. I think I need one more over on this side that's a bit of a brighter color. One more to brighten the corner up. There. Wow. That just filled those last little holes for me and made me really happy. And now I have to confess, I have been out to the garden and I cut myself a little sprig of parsley. I can't believe it's still green out there. I'm gonna just set it right there on top of the mortadella. And I have 3 sprigs of rosemary, and I'm trying to look around to see, where might those go and look really nice. I'm going to use it as a divider here between the cheese and the meat, so it can lay down right there and look just lovely. And perhaps I will use another, where else could I use another? Well, I think I might need to trim this a tiny bit, and I have an idea. Now, if I trim it, I don't have a really nice end, but if I use the end of the other part, then I do, and I can just stick it in beside the rose so that, again, it looks like a bit of a leaf sticking up. So I've got one more with a top piece. I'm gonna just snip it off a tiny bit and tuck that in over here where I have a tiny spot. And just look at that, how it frames the rose. Here's a quick little overview of the board, how it looks from above. There's the chutney, the cheeses, the eggs, apricots, nuts, rosemary, oh, a star anise that I didn't tell you about. I just threw that on there for looks. Wow, I feel like we've created a masterpiece together, and I would love to thank you for hanging out with me. I hope that part of this was helpful to you, and I would love to see what your creations are. Do share them with me. Thanks for watching.